Okay. Well, thanks very much for coming today to the talk. I realise it's Thursday. I've spoken to a few people already who said they had parties last night, and I know it's very, very hard for me to get here at this early hour of the morning, so I'm sure it is for you as well. I believe it's customary to start a session like this with a statement, something along the lines of, an admission that my name is Damien Watkins and I love developing native code. And yeah, we're a very small bunch these days. We are kind of disappearing, but I'm not afraid of memory. Memory is my friend. Matter of fact, personally, I wish I had better memory, so I'm happy to look after that. I definitely don't mind twiddling a few bits. I think that's quite fine too. So I can see I'm amongst friends here. By the way, I assume everybody here is an MFC programmer of some type. Can I just get... Yeah, well, you can applaud if you're an MFC programmer. Who's had a look at Visual Studio 2008 Service Pack 1 and the updates that were in there? Oh, again, many of you. Well, that's good. One of the sections of my talk might be a little bit boring then. You may have seen some of this stuff already. As I get older, I have to use these things every now and again just so that I can look at my notes and make sure that I cover everything. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not from these parts. I'm from Australia, so when I'm talking in the US, I usually do a deal with the audience and say, if you can stand my Australian accent, I'll do my very best to understand your American accent, and we'll see how we go through the session today. I've seen a few people yawning, and that's fine. As I said, it's very early. I don't actually mind if you go to sleep. That's fine. If you snore, I will get someone to wake you up, because the noise might compete with me, so I don't want to do that. Okay. So, I should say I'm trusting in technology today. I've actually installed Visual Studio 10, so the CTP version that you have, on Windows 7. And so I'm going to try and run my demos on that today so you can get a bit of a feel for what the new operating system looks like and what Dev 10 looks like on top of that. Touch wood, everything will go okay, but we'll see how the day progresses. I wanted to start off at the beginning and talk a little bit about the Visual C++ strategy. It's important because for a number of years it's been hard for us even to work out what's our mission in life and what are we trying to do. And over the last 2 years we've been trying to focus on where we should put our efforts and energies. And so I want to talk a little bit about that today. And then I want to talk about what we want to do with MFC going forward. And the thing about a conference like the PDC is we like to talk a lot about forward technologies and what we may be able to deliver in the future. But specifically, I want to talk about also some things that we have just delivered in that service pack, just so that you can get some confidence that things really are coming down the pipeline. And then I'll have a little bit of a summary at the end. They've asked me to take questions at the end of the session rather than during it, so I'll prefer to do that. If something on the slide clearly doesn't make any sense, then please just ask me at the time. But otherwise, if you could hold the questions till the end, and if you could use the microphones, because it then means that the recording of the session can benefit from the questions you've asked. So with that, let's move on and kind of get into the first part of the talk. Going forward, this is going to be our mission statement: to enable developer success on Microsoft platforms by providing world-class native tools. And I'm hoping who I'm talking to here today in the audience is those developers that we want to make successful. So I'm hoping this room is full of people who want to be building native applications to run on top of Windows and provide kind of functionality that then you on-sell to your customers. And so therefore help us with this Windows economic chain, as you might want to call it. Over the last 2 years, Bill Dunlap, Ayman Shukri, and myself have spent a lot of time calling our customers on the telephone. And as I look around the room here, I can see some of the companies that we've called and spoken to. I can see some of our MVPs and regional directors who have come to Redmond for the MVP Summit every year. And we've kind of said to them, what matters to you? What are the important things that you would like us to address? What should be our major priorities? And I've listed 4 that came through very strongly on the slides there. Oh, someone's taking a picture. That's fine. I don't mind you taking a picture, but sometimes you get your picture taken and you're doing something weird and then it's on the internet. So just tell me so I can adopt a thoughtful pose. Yeah, it's okay. So the picture doesn't look quite so bad, okay? It's just a little one. The first thing we hear is you have an investment in C++, and this investment is usually measured in millions of lines of code. And it's very complicated, and your build strategies are very complicated, and you often have your own build systems. And to be truthful, Visual C++ has not evolved anywhere near as quickly as it should to support these large applications that you're probably building today. Who has kind of build and compile and link time issues here in the audience? Okay, actually I can see about 20% of you haven't put your hand up, so I guess you're C# programmers or something like that. Boris Jays, one of the PMs in our group, did a talk on Monday afternoon called 10 is the New 6, where he spoke in detail about what we're doing to solve this problem. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but essentially our front-end code base is 20 to 30 years old in parts. You know, it's a very old piece of software, and it just wasn't designed for that kind of rich developer experience that you get with C#, and it wasn't designed to scale. You know, a common thing we get from customers when we've been talking to them recently is, I don't understand why, if I build an executable today on this machine, I can almost never reproduce that again. If somebody else logs into the machine, they've got different registry settings, they get a slightly different binary. If I move it to another machine, some kind of controls aren't installed and I get another kind of binary. And you know, this has been one issue that a lot of our customers are facing, and these are the kinds of things that we're trying to solve in the product going forward so that you can get, you know, be less dependent on kind of environmental settings and registry settings, or be even able to move them around with your build environment. Scalability, as I've just mentioned, was another huge issue. Boris gave some great examples of when you try and do IntelliSense and you've got a few thousand files and a few million lines of code. You know, you just see updating IntelliSense down the bottom there for ages. We have spent a lot of time trying to fix that. Jim Springfield, who's an architect on the team, has recently done a few posts on VC blog, and he's shown you how you can turn IntelliSense off. I know the usual way is to delete FEACP and the NCB file. The NCB file is finally going away in Dev 10, so I think that's a miraculous thing. And we're actually switching over to using an embedded version of SQL. So we're getting out of writing the little database business and we're handing that over to the experts. So I think you're going to see vast improvements there. Now, one thing which kind of splits our customer base is their interest in compliance. Okay? For some of our customers, this is the major thing that they're concerned with. How close to the C++ standard are we? And so for them, we have a whole lot of things coming in Dev 10 or Visual Studio 2010, as we call it now, to help with that. I'm not going to cover these. Boris covered them the other night, but it's the new keywords such as auto and static assert and the new type R value references. And we're actually still, as I speak, our super dev, Jonathan Caves, is actually trying to implement some more of the standard features in Redmond. So we do hope to have some other things there. And finally, interoperability. Although many of our customers have millions of lines of C++, they also want to use managed code or COM code or some other kind of code. And so we're going to focus a lot in the coming products on how people can fairly easily get from their native code but over to something, say, that's managed, some managed technology, and come back again. So what I'd really like to hear from you as the target for our strategy and looking at our investments, you know, is this the kind of things you want to see in Dev 10? Are we on the right path? Is this what you need going forward? Or have we missed something? Or have we got, you know, priorities a little wrong? So I can see a few people smiling. I bet you there's a few pet peeves and that they want to talk about. As I said, go to the microphones at the end and give us the feedback and let us know. Oops. I keep forgetting to use the little clicker. I do want to tell you about one very, very scary moment we had when we were talking with a customer about a year ago now, and we were saying, you know, you do this, you do that, you do something else. And we knew their application, and we said, so your application is an MFC application, isn't that correct? And they said, well, it was. It has been up until recently. But we've decided, you know, from talking to both Microsoft and your lack of activity, that we really kind of see these days MFC is dead. And that was actually what they said to us on the phone. So you can imagine Bill Iman and I, we kind of all dropped our jaws and said, you know, why are you saying this? And they said, well, our field never talks to them about MFC. They never see us at conferences. They don't see us doing anything in terms of, you know, improving or updating MFC. So the one message I want to give you here today is that MFC is not dead. Okay? The product group believe in MFC, and going forwards, we want to be the people that are adding so much functionality into MFC that you guys can just pretty seamlessly leverage going forward. Now, I do have to point out, when I first did my dry run of this talk, believe it or not, we do a few practice runs in Redmond. They told me that I had pages and pages and pages of text, but no graphics and no animations. And that seemed, well, I'm a C++ programmer, that sounded perfectly fine to me. But they said I needed to jazz it up a little bit, so this animation is almost my first animation in PowerPoint. So I hope you appreciate the 5 or 6 hours of effort it was for me to get that to work. The other thing we did when we were talking to our customers, we said, what do you really need? What do you want MFC to do for you? And the common things we got back was, we want MFC applications to look like Windows and Office applications. The reason is that they're selling to our customers, and our customers are familiar with Windows, they're familiar with Office. They know the UI paradigms, they know the metaphors. And so when they build an app using MFC, the more of that we can leverage for them, the better. Okay? And so we made that one of our core goals here. And for those people, when I get to the service pack that we released recently and show you a demo of that, you'll see the Office 2007 ribbon. And so you'll get some understanding of what we think is very important for us to do there. But of course, you don't want something that just looks like Word or just looks like Excel. You need to add some speciality, some functionality of your own, which is, you know, what you do, whether it's a CAD/CAM package or whatever. And so we want to make it very easy for you to get kind of standard functionality, but incredibly easy for you to extend it so you can do some value add, which is what your product's all about. So in 2008, Service Pack 1, we released this really, well, I would say modernized MFC with support for things like the 2007 ribbon from Office. We kind of decoupled a little bit the architecture and introduced this thing called a visual manager so that it gets very easy to kind of swap out styles or build applications with different styles, and so that going forward we'll be able to add support for new things. Have people seen the Windows Scenic ribbon yet in the keynotes and demos? Who likes it? Ooh, okay. Who doesn't like it? Who's asleep? I guess that's all. Oh, 2 hands, okay. I'll have to jazz it up or do something to make it a bit more interesting. But that's good. You know, for the 25% of people that like it, we want to be able to give it to you for free. We'd like you to be able to use it. For those that don't like it, we'd like you to be able to do something else. We want to provide the functionality, but we don't want to lock you into it. The other thing we provided was an implementation of TR1. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that today, because today the focus is MFC. But just for you people who care a lot about compliance, or just the functionality that's in TR1, or you know, more people are used to seeing this functionality referred to as Boost, or at least a superset of it referred to as the Boost libraries. We've added that as well too. Somebody I know, Scott Myers, says even if it's just for shared pointer, it's worth using TR1 because of the functionality that gives you. Stefan, who's our STL dev, he actually likes to talk about the regular expression parsing. I think that's one of his major features. And there's a whole lot of new types and new containers coming. And so all that functionality is now in the product as of Service Pack 1. It'll, of course, be there in Dev 10. Going forward, I had a few questions the other night. We've added R-value references to the compiler, another C++ OX feature. So people have said we'll be adding support for that in our TR1 implementation, and that's the plan of record today. So that once you get the new compiler and you have R-value references, we'll use them internally in the STL to give you better performance and that when we say reallocating vectors and those kinds of things. So we're trying to make lots of investments to get our compliance up as well as we're going to. I had to pick some graphics again to keep the kind of pre-PDC people happy, so I kind of went for this one here. Again, a bit of a Halloween theme, and the kind of caption is, we're trying to get our house in order. Okay. Let me skip on a few slides. Okay. So at this stage, I want to slip out and do a quick demo. I'm a little bit concerned because before the talk, I was talking to Dave, and he said he tried to do what I did with what I'm about to do with the CDP last night, and it didn't work. So nothing like hearing that somebody just tried what you're doing and had a failure. But, you know, I'm prepared to give it a go. And I'm just going to build a very, very simple MFC app, just picking mostly the defaults. So just File, New Project. Oh, yes, that's right. Sorry. That's better. File, New Project. My apologies. It's an MFC application. I think we should give it some name like PDC 2008. Unfortunately, for those that were like here with Nicola's talks or in Boris's talk, they're incredibly proficient at typing, so they do a lot of code on the fly. I'm not so good. Okay, so I tend to use a couple more wizards and have the line of code and just uncomment them. Actually, our dev lead for the library, Alexandro Contenti, who some of you may see in like Channel 9 videos and things like that, he knows the best way to rile me in a meeting is to make me take notes and project them up on the wall, and there's just red squiggles everywhere, you know. And he goes, can't you learn to spell yet? Can't you learn to type yet? So, okay. Now, all I'm going to do here is just initially pick finished. I'm not going to do anything in particular. I'm just going to take all the defaults straight out of the box. And then, apparently this is where it fell over for Dave last night, if I'm correct, building it. So I'm going to try and build it now. Have many people seen Dev 10 building on Win 7 yet? One person, two people, three, so it's not very many. Yeah. I haven't seen it yet, so I hope I see it for the first time in a few seconds. And it looks like it's managed to work. So I'll start without debugging. This is the Visual Studio kind of look and feel that you get. It can do some of the fun things like you can grab a toolbar and just float it off there if you want. I even tried this on another version the other day, and you can float it right outside the window of the application, which is always an interesting thing. I imagine we're going to have all these toolbars everywhere, and you're never going to know which one's referring to your Word document or your Excel document. So. But you can do that if you want. I'll bring it back here so I can manage to remember where I am. And then you can do all sorts of other things like go and drag these and have a look where they're going to put them on the pane. I usually manage to get it very confused by the end of this, which is why I find I have to actually go and build another application because it's starting to look a very confused environment there, isn't it? Let me see if I can backtrack enough to get me to where I want to go. Okay, I'm already lost. And then you can just keep adding new documents with like Control-N, so and you can put them across the page there. So I'm very happy that it worked. I hope Dave believes me now you can do it, but we'll see going forward. I've got another little one here that actually I did try. People have seen the Draw Client program, I assume, before. This one is using the Office 2007 ribbon. So let me just go ahead firstly and rebuild it. I like to kind of rebuild it live so we can see that it works. It also stops me talking on and on and on so that it gives people a bit of a break. Okay, and let's start it up. And so here you can see the 2007 ribbon. It does all the things you'd kind of expect. You can see the ribbon compress as you move it over and disappear when it gets too small and comes all the way back again. If I decide I want to do something like add a rectangle, you can see here that as I go and put the rectangle up on the page, see this little menu that pops up, and dynamically I can see what the colours will look like. I don't claim to be any colour expert, so I'm randomly going to select a couple. And then you can also see the size of the line change dynamically just as I'm rolling up and down there. And we can do all sorts of other things, like if we come back home and add an ellipse on the top, and we can give that another colour. And then, of course, we can go in and do the usual things like save as and go and save these somewhere. And you can tell I practiced that demo. That's why when I went to save it, it said there's already a document there with the same name. So, you know, I kind of find you get a lot of functionality for free now with the MFC. I like the way it looks like an Office application, so people are very familiar with it. People, you know how to use it, know what the kind of metaphor is. But if you want to, you can look and feel like Visual Studio. Or you can, of course, do your own system. That's also perfectly fine with us. I'm going to remember to click back now so we get back to the right screen. And I didn't show it to you because I was just picking the wizards on the way through, but Sarita said, do make sure to show them the selection in the wizard where you can pick what kind of environment you want. I think Sarita wanted to do that because she was responsible for the wizard, so she just wants you to know where she decided to place everything. And you can see there the various options you can pick as you're going through. I am curious, is anybody shipping an application using Service Pack 1 and some of this new functionality at the moment? I know quite a lot of you have said you've played with it. Got half a hand, so that's in the beta stage or something like that, is it, at the moment? Yep. Anybody over here? Oh, no, I'm still... Okay. So not too many. I'm still waiting to see the first few applications that come out using the new look and feel. So hopefully that won't be too far into the future. Again, I thought, okay, I've got to add a couple of animations. But this time I got Bill to do it for me because, you know, I'm not particularly good at that. And Bill could knock this up in a couple of minutes. I wanted to kind of give you a quick, rough idea of where we've added all the new classes and the new functionality. So do you like the way the new pops up at the end? I think that's very effective, isn't it? So if you have a look in here, you can see that almost, well, there's two things here. Firstly, the size of MFC almost doubled with all the new classes and that got added in. So it's a pretty substantial extension. And the secondly is that almost all of the support has gone into the GUI kind of area. I mean, traditionally MFC has been a very thin wrapper around Win32 APIs, but we've moved a little bit away from it here. There's a lot more going on inside the actual runtime now than more or less just marshalling parameters and holding on to handles and things like that. So there has been a little bit of an architectural change. Most things, as far as I know, still work exactly the same way they always have, but you've just got this extra functionality if you'd like to get to it. And again, just to go through, oh, sorry, I look down every now and again and I get too close to the mic. Just to go through quickly, the extensibility thing. I said earlier that we want to enable you to be able to tailor apps so that they can fit whatever you want to do. And I just wanted to point out here, even in the ribbon, what you have is a set of classes that you can go and manipulate to get whatever kind of effects you'd like. Okay, did we like that nice little animation that's coming up? Yeah. One day somebody once told me you can tell you're a manager when your programming language of choice is PowerPoint. So, you know, preparing for this talk might have started me on that path. I guess you never know. So now I want to kind of get to the things that we're adding for Dev 10. Now, a few of them are already in the CTP that you have. A couple of them are planned worked items. So we always have to kind of preface what we're saying here with, it's our absolute intention to get you all this functionality, but at the end of the day, we can't guarantee that. But you can see some of it already. I'd like to know from you, maybe after the talk, whether we're targeting the correct things, whether we're targeting the things that you think your users want to see in your application. So for a start, let's talk about the Application Recovery and Restart Manager. So this is actually a Windows 6 feature. It's also going to be in it's going to be in Windows 7 and beyond. I assume you've come in some mornings and you've seen that overnight your applications have closed down and opened up again, and you've got a little call out from the bottom saying, Windows had to restart overnight because we updated, certain DLLs via Windows Update or something. And this is the functionality that does that. Essentially, when we're going to update a DLL, we call all the applications that are running and that depend on that and say, we're going to have to shut you down. Please save your state away somewhere. And then that will save away. And then we'll shut the application, do whatever updating we need, and bring it back. So it's a really great way for us to service our applications in the field without popping a dialog up to the user and saying, hey, we're going to reboot you in 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, and things like this. Another thing that we've kind of hooked into this, you'll see the picture there, that one strikes home for me. I have 5 children, and the number of Sunday nights they'd come running out of their bedroom or somewhere and saying, my assignment that's due tomorrow, I've just lost it. And I'd say, well, just restore it from a backup. And they'd say, backup? What's that? Okay, and I say, well, when did you start on it? Well, I started on it at lunchtime because it's due tomorrow, and they'd be frantically in there cutting and pasting bits and pieces. And the whole thing would be lost. They'd never have saved it. They'd have never turned the computer off at any point during this. And so what we thought in looking at the restart stuff is, well, we could go one step further even and add kind of background auto-saving like Word and other applications do, so that your users, if they happen to get an unforeseen error as opposed to an update, they're also not going to lose all of their data. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a quick demo of that. So let's switch over here again. And let's have a look at, I'm not going to lay claim to this app. This was one that a couple of us developed just to see how things would work. And I think it might have been Ali who actually named it. So he calls it the Cool app. I don't know if it's particularly cool, but I'm not going to argue with him. Now, one thing I want to point out here is, again, we're trying to make these things easy for you. Either select something from a wizard. To get this functionality, to get automatic backup of your user's data and the ability to both restart your application and also to handle crashes, takes these 2 lines of code. And I think that's actually a pretty good thing when we can get all that functionality going for just 2 lines. So firstly, let's try and rebuild this application, and hopefully all the things will go well there. And then when we're done, we'll kick it off and start it. There is a security feature, I guess I should mention, inside the application restart and recovery, and that's the fact that when you start it up, if your application crashes within 1 minute, Windows won't restart it. So this is to stop any kind of denial of service where somebody might have an app which starts, fails, starts, fails, starts, fails, and takes down the usefulness of the machine. And we found when we were doing these demos, we'd have to ad lib for a whole minute before it would work. And none of us could really time a minute, so we'd often talk for 5 or 10 minutes or something like that. So we've gone now in this version to the super advanced feature of actually disabling the Crash Me Now button. Okay, so that way I know as soon as the button's there, we can actually crash and go on. But I want to show you how it works. Let me use a very meaningful piece of text there. And we can say that that one's been saved. Well, actually, I should say it's been saved. Let's go over here and say this one's has not been saved yet, so this is an unsaved document. Okay, and you would have just noticed then that my Crash Me button's been enabled, so I know my 60 seconds is up. So I can go ahead and click Crash Me Now, and up pops that dialog box. Now this is a bonus question. Who can tell me what they didn't see then? Blue screen of death. Yeah, we would hope normally not to get one of those when I restart. But okay. Report this to Microsoft. Yeah, so the Windows error reporting stuff kicking. The MFC, yes, the Visual C++ error dialog. We used to throw up a dialog, I think, just to slap people around the face. Because the dialog used to say, your application is behaving in an unusual manner, and the Visual C++ runtime has decided to terminate it, or the Visual C++ runtime will terminate it. Click OK to continue, with just an OK button there. So the poor, my child's in tears at the computer because the homework's all gone, and we're forcing them to go and click OK. I didn't even bother to save it, so I've lost everything. So I've got to tell you, when I joined the team, the very first feature crew I was responsible for was the feature crew to remove that dialog. So that's the kind of deep technical challenge you get on day one when you join the feature team. Okay. Another interesting sideline to that, when we add new features, or in this case remove one, we have to do a whole lot of metrics, and we have to talk about our testing code coverage. Okay? And so when you're finishing your feature and you're going to RI it, you have to say, what percentage of your code you test. And we have kind of minimum bars and things like that. The tough question I was faced with is, if you remove a line of code, what code coverage do you have? Okay. And it became a bit funny because I actually put down 0. The line's gone. Okay. And then, of course, I got into trouble. You're not testing well enough. The feature you've done here doesn't have adequate testing. So anyhow, you can see it's crashed. You can see it's come back. There's another feature you can see here for the first time. Anybody pick out what it is? It's a task dialog. Yeah, so now we have a nice task dialog class. So normally you'd come in here and you'd expect to see a radio button or something saying, do you want to recover or do you want to discard? And now we have the new task dialog in here. So I can come down and I can float over either of these two, and I can pick to either recover the document I had never saved, or I can choose to discard it. Also, it was funny, during the pre-DC dry run for this, I showed this dialogue, and the people watching thought it was a mock-up that I'd made. And they said, oh, no, don't show that. It's got far too much text on it. You should never have that much text, in a PowerPoint. And I kind of looked at them and said, but that's what the dialogue says. I don't know how to solve that problem. So I'm still stuck with that. So we can go in and say, okay, we want to cover it. There's document 1, and it was saved, and it's opened it and put it in the back. There's document 2, which wasn't saved, and you can see up here you've got this nice recovered logo. So I don't know. I think that's incredible functionality to get for 2 lines of code. So, do you like it? Okay, that's good. One thing I forgot to mention before, and I just thought about it now, is I should also say that with that new Visual Manager and the way things are implemented, you can do things like allow your users to change the colors. I actually find on Win 7, I kind of tend to like the blackish look a lot. Okay, I don't know how you feel about it, but that's my preferred preference. So there you go. There's 3 new features you wouldn't have seen before. We don't slap you around the face with the application termination dialog. Your users can automatically get their data recovered, and you can actually service and stop and start instances, all for 2 lines of code. And it's 2 lines of code if you've got a pre-existing application. Of course, if you're building a new one, it's just a checkbox which says support restart manager, and you just tick it, and we can insert the 2 lines of code for you automatically. So trying to make it as easy as we can. Okay. I'll switch back to here. Many of you have probably used the live icons and rich preview feature in Explorer. I really find it very, very useful because we winds up having lots and lots of directories, sometimes with hundreds of documents in there, and you're trying to work out which one it is you want to open. You've probably all gone through that process of just starting at the top and opening them one at a time. And to me, it's really useful when you can get this functionality for free. I'll move on to the picture on the next slide. So here's an example. I only have a mock-up of this today. We do actually have some code running back home which implements this. This one here, it wasn't though. This I just did a screen capture and a bit of doctoring. But you get the idea that you'll be able to create your own MFC document type, and per file extension you'll be able to register a previewer. So if Explorer is looking at it and you've got a list of these documents and you go down, you can get both the rich preview and the live icon thing happening for your documents fairly cheaply. This isn't, you won't have to do much work, but because of the way this works, we have to have more or less a separate DLL that we need to register to do the previewing. We don't want you to have to start your whole application up to get an image to supply to this. But we're pretty sure in the prototype we should be able to pretty much automatically generate all of that for you. There might be some kind of installation step to get these things registered correctly when you go and deploy your application, but we think it'll be fairly minimal. So, yep, hopefully live icons and rich preview support in the next. Who thinks this is an interesting feature that they'd like to have for their customers? Oh, okay, that's good. Yeah. You can clap or raise your hand, either's fine with me. Who went and has seen the Windows 7 taskbar in some of the demonstrations or things so far? I've got to say, I really love the Windows 7 taskbar. I mean, there's some things about Windows that you can love and you can hate, and I guess it varies person to person, but the taskbar's always been something that's been a bit of a nightmare for me, because I actually usually like my things laid out from left to right, and I always want to have Outlook over on the very left-hand side. And I almost always want to turn off all the quick links. Okay? And I know this will vary person from person, but you kind of have always got the Windows default behavior before. But going forward, with the new taskbar and this concept of jump lists, we're going to give you the ability to define the way that this should work for your application. And of course, users, as you know, can kind of override some of the functionality, but not all of it. I went to Rob's talk about this the other day where he was describing it. You might wonder, the picture down the bottom there looks a little bit odd. 2 weeks ago, this was actually called the destination list rather than the jump list. So when I picked the picture, somebody with bags going on a holiday to lots of different destinations made a lot of sense. But I guess now for the jump list, it looks a little bit out of whack. But still. So what I wanted to do was actually show you a demo of the taskbar and the kind of functionality we're thinking of having. But I can't show you this in MFC just because we don't have it yet. But what I thought I would do is firstly switch over and then show you how it works for Internet Explorer and give you an idea what we're planning on doing. So you've seen already that inside the new applications you can have an MDI or a tab document, and you can have multiple documents open. But down the bottom here, you'll notice that there's only one Internet Explorer icon, even though some of the screens you can see are the only document or the only tab in a version of Internet Explorer, or a version of Internet Explorer that has multiple tabs open. And to me, this is the easiest way to think about it. When I'm looking for a page, I know Internet Explorer has it. I don't necessarily know whether it was the first instance of Internet Explorer I started or the last instance or somewhere in between. And if I know what instance it is, I don't know what page it's tabbed on. So I've come over here, and we're going to probably imitate exactly this functionality in the version of the product. So if I have a look here, and I say click on this one, well, I guess people are familiar with this, that as you go over one, it glasses out all the other instances so you can see what's happening. So here, if I go and have a look, I can go to our VC blog page. I just wonder who here reads our VC blog page? Many people? Okay, that's kind of funny. The people on the ends don't and the people in the middle do. So I'm not sure if there's some relationship to that, if it's the way that you've arranged. We use the VC blog page a lot for getting out information very quickly about new things we've done. So as Boris mentioned in his talk the other day, we've added support for lambdas and auto and static assert into the compiler. So if you go to our blog page now, you can read this long post that Stefan did about that. And when I say long post, I really mean long post. Like there's lots of code, lots of text, lots of code, lots of text, lots of code, lots of text. This is very similar to what my slides looked like before we had the dry run. And they said you can't put so much on a thing. So yeah, if we keep going down, you'll just see more and more text and comments and examples. And text and comments and examples. And then even a little bit more text and comments and examples. And then finally we get to the end there. And what's interesting is this posting went up Monday after Boris's talk because we couldn't talk publicly about anything until the CTP was in your hands. And if you come here and have a look, you'll already see that there's 36 comments on the actual post itself. And I know that Stefan and a few others are already answering many questions. I do just want to call out one of the people that's actually responsible for nearly all of the C++ OX work that we've done in the product so far, and that's Jonathan Caves. Jonathan is our super dev, and he's also our representative on the C++ standards committee. So 3 to 4 times a year he goes to the standards meeting and he helps work on the language definition and what they're doing for C++ OX. And then after he's got the new stuff, he comes back to work all enthusiastic and says, wow, we should do auto, it's really great. And then we have a kind of talk about it, and then he starts off on implementing it and things. And so most of the C++ OX functionality that we've got's been because Jonathan's so firstly enthusiastic about it, and so he gets involved and then goes ahead and builds it. So if you could, I'd like you to thank Jonathan for all the work that he's done on that, even though he's not here. He's actually back at work adding more C++ OX features, okay, which is what we want Jonathan to do. Now, no, you can't ask me what the new features are that he's working on. Okay, we'll leave that when we get to the end. The other thing, too, is, so we plan on providing this kind of functionality by default. Again, I've got some other things here, some Channel 9 videos that we've done. The other thing you can do is when you right-click on it, you get a kind of list of other things that you might want to have happen. Now, here, this is a little bit more up to you to define. Okay? Things like recent documents make sense, but you might also want to have in here a jump to your home page for your product. So if I'm running the, well, here's a case of I say the XYZ application. Of course, I should Americanize it and say the XYZ application. Then you might want to have a link that goes to that product's web page that always comes up here in the list. And that's the kind of thing you can do. Or we might want to have a link that jumps to the VC blog page or something like that. So going forward, what I think we'll be doing here is giving you things like recent documents by default, and we'll manage all of that, but you can turn it on and off. And then APIs so that you can add your own destinations inside the taskbar here. And I think it'll look really good when people get the application. They're actually going to see something that's going to look really well integrated into Windows 7. It'll work with the taskbar. It'll understand things like the recovery and restart manager stuff, even though that was Windows 6. And hopefully this is the kind of thing you want to see. So I guess at the end of the talk, I want to hear if this is what you want your MFC applications to do. So let me flick back. The next thing I want to talk about is the Windows Scenic Ribbon. People are laughing when I say Windows Scenic Ribbon. Oh, it's the package. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. As I said, I had to add some graphics, and if you go to clip art and type in ribbon, this was the best thing I could find, with a little bit of time. So, but I'm glad you appreciate it anyhow. So, well, I also wanted to have a bit of a Halloween feel to all of these things too. So this kind of looked a bit Halloween. I've got to thank a couple of people within Microsoft, but particularly Ryan. We're talking about a ribbon, Windows is talking about a ribbon, WPF is talking about a ribbon, and Office is talking about a ribbon. And we thought it might get very confusing to people to understand, well, which one do I use and when and why does Microsoft seem to have so many? I actually say that we only have two ribbons. We have the Office ribbon and the brand new Windows Scenic ribbon that you probably saw for the first time. I think it was Tuesday in the keynote. Which came up with a simple way to talk about, which ribbon is designed for what kind of user, so you'll know which one you want. So if you're using WPF ribbon, then clearly we think you're writing a managed application. Okay? Or at least you've got a fair amount of managed code in it. Your UI is in managed code. If you're using the MFC ribbon, then we think you're doing native development, but you're using the MFC framework. And that makes sense. If you want to use a ribbon, you don't want to be managed, but you want to be native code, and you also don't want to use MFC, then we think you should use the Windows Scenic ribbon. So that's what we're trying to say here. We all have certain requirements about what you need to run on. The Windows Scenic ribbon is going to be for both Vista and newer, so they are going to backport that. The WPF ribbon, you need .NET 3.5 and above, and our MFC ribbon today currently works all the way back to 2K. So thanks. We hear from a lot of our customers that if it's something that just works on the brand new operating system, whatever flavor that is, then it's not a lot of use to them because most of their customers are 1 or 2 versions of the OS behind. So we're paying a lot of attention to backporting things wherever we can. We can't backport something like the Restart Manager because it's a very kernel-specific thing, but something like the ribbon we're trying to do as good a job as we can of supporting backwards OSs. Oh, hang on. I don't mean to say backwards OSs. Previous OSs, they're not backwards. Okay. The other thing will be, of course, that WPF and ourselves will both support the Office and the Windows style. The Windows style will just support Windows. So I should say the Windows Scenic ribbon will just work on ribbon. And then the good news that we have is that the WPF and the Windows ones are coming to a store near you soon, but you can already get and use our one today, as I've already shown you previously, for the Office 2007 look and feel. Of course, the Windows 7 look and feel will only come out later when Dev 10 ships. So that's a little bit far away. Well, it's not a little bit far away. It's sometime next year. And the other question we get asked a lot is, will we be providing, firstly, XML support for ribbons with MFC? As you know, currently at the moment, we don't use XML as a markup language. And the answer is, yes, we will. We're talking currently to the other ribbon people to look at their schemas. We'd like to be as compatible as possible with the other XML ribbon markup languages that the company has. We can't be 100% compatible because we can do some things that they can't, but the goal here is going to be as close as we can. And we're also working on a ribbon designer that will ship, hopefully, in Dev 10, so that you'll be able to build your ribbons for MFC just by dragging and dropping components backwards and forwards. So that's kind of the ribbon landscape. I can show you some demos. I can show you something special that Pat sent me this morning. Oh, switch. Thanks. I can show you something special that Pat sent me this morning, but first you have to promise, so you all have to raise your hand and repeat after me. I State your name. Yes, everybody does that to me every time. Won't tell anybody about this. Sorry, I didn't hear that. Won't tell anybody about it. So here we have a kind of familiar looking, ribbon. And you'll notice that there's a new style down here in the bottom. Okay, so it may not look like this, but here's our first version of our Windows 7 ribbon. So at least with this one, you won't actually get it for real until Visual Studio 2010. But you can see we're pretty much on the way with it. At least we've got a good start. So, but just don't tell anybody I showed it to you. Okay? And that's particularly the people in the camera. You guys, you've all committed on their behalf, you realise. Okay. A couple of other things we're looking at. The most common request we get is to get graphics out of GDI and move it over to DirectX for MFC applications. You know, the graphics really are a bit poor. Hopefully you went to some of the talks. Did people go to Anantha's talk on the D2D stuff and things like that? So we will be adding support for the D2D graphics in the next version of MFC. Well, that's our goal. So you'll be able to have the graphics now done on the graphics card, and therefore it'll get hardware acceleration wherever possible. That is a really good feature because we look very tired at the moment. I mean, MFC, not me particularly, but I am very tired. The other thing they've done is they've paid a lot of attention to backward compatibility. They have some software fallback modes so that if you're running on a particular card and it doesn't support accelerated graphics, they'll do it in software. And when they do it in software, they do it better than GDI does in terms of performance anyhow. And it's very interoperable with GDI and D3D. And so we think this is the way to move forward and actually get your MFC applications with some really cool graphics. Now, I did ask Robert Neumann. He's an intern with the group at the moment. He actually finishes tomorrow. It's his last day, but he's been helping out with a lot of the MFC things. If he could or would mind making me a very cheesy little demos so that we can show D2D in action. Now, I want to do a disclaimer here. There's a kind of performance figure on the top of the screen. I'm not claiming you're always going to get this kind of performance. All we did was just said to him, okay, you know, let's have a really quick little sample. We just wanted 2 panes. Each pane, one would be using GDI to kind of render random coloured rectangles. The other one would be rendering random coloured rectangles but using D2D. We based it off the D2D hands-on lab that's here and just flash them up on the screen and see how many frames per second you get out of both of them. Now, frames per second is only one measurement. Robert did this in his spare time. You know, I just want to give the normal disclaimers that we're not saying that this is the kind of performance increase that you think you're going to see all the time. I was wondering how the screens would go with it, but they're doing a reasonable job. And you can see that GDI over there occasionally gets to 200 frames a second. And you can see that the D2D constantly is above 4,000 frames per second. So, you know, it's a very simple example. It's not all the kind of applications you're going to want to do. We understand that. But I think this is kind of giving you at least one indication of some of the increase in both kind of performance and ability that we're going to get by moving over to D2D. Yeah, I think particularly thanks to Robert for fixing that up and sending it down to me. So that was really nice. Okay, let's go back to here. So I wanted to see how we're going on time, and things are working out fairly well. We're getting near towards the end of what we're going to be doing, but hopefully I'll have plenty of time for questions. Another thing we've been paying a lot of attention to, and it may just be because I've joined the team and I'm a little bit older, but you'll notice me needing to do this every now and again because my paper doesn't scale. So if I want to make something bigger, I'm kind of stuck. Also, if you were in Anantha's talk the other day, he spoke about statistics they've been gathering about screen resolutions and where people are setting their screens at the moment. You'd know if you have this send information back to Microsoft checkbox in many things that you install. Some of the bits of information we got were to do with how many people had their screens set to native or the hardware resolution versus something else. And I can't remember the figure from his slide in particular, but a huge number of people do not have their screen set to hardware resolution. They actually go for something smaller. Invariably, it's because they're like me and they can't read the text, and so they want to make the text bigger. So going forward, we want to solve this. We want to make it very, very simple for people to build applications that actually scale really well when their users go and actually change their DPI settings. So we don't want users to actually move the resolution away from the native one. We want them to keep that. But you know that little adjust DPI option. We want people to actually go ahead and set that. And just to give you an example here, we're kind of the biggest culprits. Here's just some simple MFC applications. You can see running at 96 points per inch, I think, on the first one. And I'm not sure whether the second one is 122 or 144, whatever the next two sets up, whether it's 25% or 50% up. But you can see even the bad job we did there, where when you scale up, you'll notice that the text got bigger, but the icons don't. Okay, and so therefore, you can see the text kind of moves across the screen as it's getting larger, but the icons are staying the same size, so that's not a good experience. And the other one, you can maybe detect the little drop-down button there, which stretches from the top to the bottom in the first image. It doesn't scale as well, so it starts to pull away from the bottom as things get bigger. So we're actually working with Matthew and a few other people from over on the DPI awareness team, and we're trying to fix up our product so that going forward you can fix up your products so that the users can actually use the DPI to scale and everything's going to look and work correctly. I see Rob's joined us at the back there. He's probably very keen to find out how the scenic ribbon went and things like that in the little talk. So I'm very glad that Rob's here. We had mixed feelings, 50-50, about the Windows ribbon earlier on, about who liked it and who didn't. So I'm sure you'd love to talk to people and find out what's going on. So Rob's at the back there, in the middle. Please catch either Rob or I after this and talk more to us about the ribbon. So I'm kind of getting to the end of the slides. I just wanted to say a few things. Firstly, we're sorry. We've been a bit lost for a few years. We were a bit schizophrenic between do we need to be a first-class managed language, and we kind of spent a lot of time and effort there, and our native tooling story suffered. We didn't do MFC. We didn't scale well as the database, as your source code bases got bigger and bigger and bigger. But we're back on track now, and we hope to be remedying many of these things in Dev 10. And I wanted to point out that, some of the stuff I showed you today is future work, which we hope to get done, but the service pack is already out there. You can already use it today. Things like the Restart Manager and the C Task Dialog are already there today, and I've shown you those, and they're in the CTPs that you have. Moving forward, we're just going to be putting more and more effort into those things. Unfortunately, being a talk on the last day, I didn't get to point to all the other relevant talks you should go and attend. I did post about these on the VC blog a week ago when I knew I was on Thursday. I mentioned Boris's talk already. We have moved the parallel computing platform team's concert runtime into the CRT. That's actually in the CTPs that you have there. So I don't know if you've been to any of the talks that Rick Malloy or Keith Yedlin or Lynn Hill have done, but now it's actually, I think, a very good model for writing concurrency that's going to scale going forwards as we get more and more cores. So I'd encourage you to look at many of those. I really, really like many of the features in Windows 7, and I particularly think They've hit a lot of things that address our customers. The graphics, the D2D is one. I said earlier on to Rob, I really like the new taskbar. You know, one thing I always hated, I won't flip to the demo, is that when I used to start Internet Explorer, it went to my home page. But often I knew I wanted to go to the VC blog page or somewhere else. The way I can just select that now from the jump list, terminology right. If I can just select that, is so much better for me. I just find to be able to right-click on it and say I want to go there and have it start the browser going to the right place rather than download something else. All these little things, I know they're very small, but they just make it so much simpler to use, I think. And finally, the resources I've been talking about. You know, our blog, our Channel 9 videos. Normally you'll see stuff on the Channel 9 videos or the blog before we get it into the documentation. Of course, use the documentation as well. Please, 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 please fill out an eval form. The reason I say this is even if you want to give me an incredibly low rating, that's kind of okay. But if they get a whole lot of forms back, they'll say, oh, people are interested in native code, people are interested in MFC, maybe we should have another session next year. But if they get 2 forms back, then, you know, they kind of think, oh, wow, was it worth doing it or something like that. So regardless of what you want to say about me, could you all please fill out a form so they know that at least you came, particularly early on a Thursday morning. And with that, I think we're reasonably good on time. We have about 10 minutes left, and I'd love to take any questions, comments, feedback, and most importantly, I want to know, are we on the right track? If you could, please use the microphones. That would be a big help. Yep.
One question I wanted to ask is multi-touch support. They've changed the message pump model and the message flow model quite a bit with regard to focus. Question is with regard to MFC and how it plans to deal with the issue of this this multi-focus physics issue and essentially taking MFC applications into a touch frame.
Yeah. So I'd love to get your feedback on a few things. I'm going to give you a little bit of our planning logic here, and I want to know if it's right or wrong. Another thing we constantly heard, I mentioned before about the backward support for previous OSs, was that it's not as high a priority if we move to something that needs a new piece of hardware and the latest operating system. So with the multi-touch thing, you need a multi-touch screen or something, and you need Windows 7. So because we've heard that it's going to be a technology MFC we'll want to use, but it shouldn't be our number one priority. It's on our list of considerations for Dev 10, but I would imagine one that's not going to make the bar. We're just going to run out of time to do that. But we will definitely be looking at adding multi-touch support going forward because we think that touch screens are a very, if you think of kiosks and things like that, you're ordering at restaurants, all the classic examples they give, they would be things we would like to support. But I would say don't expect it in Dev 10. And we have to do some architecturing to figure out how we're going to put it in. So definitely multi-touch we will do. It's not a prize 0. And I'm really keen to hear if we've understood the message we've heard from you is the fact that it would be hardware specific and OS specific. You know, are we making the right choice by making it a prize 1 rather than a prize 0?
Right. The second question is with regard to the Azure service. And web services, and if there's going to be any plans to implement something at an MFC level in order to help build scalable web services that are, and did see the presentation before.
By Nicola. Yep.
But the issue is encapsulation of it inside of MFC classes to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah. So that's a great example of where we, with people like Nicola and Rob, they put some wonderful functionality into the OS and then we then expose it. But we can't expose it all, as soon as it comes out. So probably I'm imagining for Dev 10, we're going to say, use the technologies that Nicola was talking about earlier on, but you might have to roll it yourself. It clearly does make sense for us to have some classes which look like MFC, .NET classes like web requests and things like that going forward. But another thing we hear from our customers is that many, it's a bit like the multi-touch. It's not that it's not important, but it's just not the major criteria thing that many people are writing desktop applications. They'd like some web support, but it's not their core scenario today. So again, a Pry 1 type feature as opposed to a Pry 0. Thanks, great questions. Oh, yeah, sorry. Well, that was very rude of me, sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. I have a question and a comment. And the question is, how many developers work on the Visual C++ team?
Oh, gee, I don't know the exact number. I'd like to give you a figure. It's a number bigger than, you know, I guess it also depends who you count as the team, because there's the front end and the back end. And like the PCP guys that are doing the concurrency work, I wouldn't classify them as VC developers because they're not in our building, but all of the stuff they're doing goes into our product. So, you know, I'm not trying to avoid the question. I just want to give you an answer that's something meaningful. If I say between 50 and 100, you might have a figure.
Oh, that's fine, yeah. I just kind of want to get a gauge.
It's not thousands.
Yeah, well,
it's clearly not thousands. You can see by how we have to do very little each time.
Okay, the comment is regarding the Direct2D, which I think is great. But in talking with that team, they don't have any kind of answer for how you would do vector graphic output to the clipboard. You know, and since MFC has the whole server item and data object class library to support easy creation of meta files, it seems like that's kind of a hole that you guys are going to have to address somehow. Yeah.
So we do have a great relationship with the Windows teams, like an Anther and people like that. And sometimes, you know, they show us their list and there's something that's, you know, just missing their cut or something, and we say, no, that's really important to our customers. So I'd love to take that feedback.
Well, and I've told Anantha, but, you know, maybe if you get the similar feedback and you can put a little more pressure on them, because I think some kind of clipping format's really important.
No, I would totally agree. I didn't give you my email address, but it's just damien@microsoft.com. So feel free to send me that, and I'll definitely talk to them.
Okay.
And see what we can do there.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, there was a question and the comment. Yep. How many? Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I'll start with my list.
All right. I do have to remember. I once heard. I think it was Spiro Agnew, but I could be incorrect, say, when they started a Q&A session, okay, who's got good questions to go with my answers, okay? And so I can tend to do that. If you come up to me and say, wow, what about this really difficult scenario here, and I've got clearly no idea, then I may just randomly do like a politician and say, look, I think you're missing the point. The point's way over here. But go ahead.
Okay, first one. I'm wondering, could there be some time in the future that you could actually look at namespacing the actual MFC into proper hierarchy? Yeah. And just add a simple little wizard that goes, run this on my code, just as a find and replace, puts in the namespace, colon, whatever, to just namespace everything so our code could be cleaner while avoiding conflicts.
Okay. Applause means that, I mean, you can see what happened in the standard, and you know, if you look at C++, I don't know, 10 years ago when it didn't have namespaces, and you know, as code bases grow and that, you get these issues. And if you notice with the concurrency stuff, the first couple of internal versions were just kind of like concurrency this and concurrency that, and you know, that's now gone into I think it's a Microsoft : concurrency : namespace. So, you know, we're aware of that. It's a little harder with legacy code where there's millions of lines that are out there. But
find and replace works.
Okay.
It does.
Yeah.
I just want to add that suggestion. Okay, second question. On Windows Vista and Windows 7, could we look at getting dynamic glass as the background of the toolbars and dockers instead of having the flat gray? It looks awful.
Okay.
Let's put glass as one of the theme choices, maybe on the black. Like all tabs would be solid, but things like behind toolbar icons, let's move to alpha transparency and just get rid of the old look.
I'm definitely not going to promise that for Dev 10, but yeah.
Well, it's actually kind of important also with multi-touch, which leads into my next question.
Yep.
if you're going to fix the DPI aware problem, let's make it auto size when you're mousing over with your finger, so that it will auto resize to make the buttons a little bit bigger. Please steal the Mac dock for that, for the toolbars. Why?
Yeah.
It's
I tell you, as you get older, you pay a lot more attention to accessibility things. I hear what you're saying.
Okay.
We can move to the next in the line. We can be fair.
There's someone over there.
Okay. Oh, no, he was just going. He's bored. Thanks.
Actually, there was only one more.
Yep.
In regards to maybe getting it's more suggestion than a question. RTF with the Direct 2D.
Sorry, to get
RTF rendering in there for.
Yeah. So
Direct
we
2D
will.
And Direct Write. Because
yeah,
those were the two important ones that I thought were.
Yeah. So
really
Direct Write is on the list, but is low enough down that I could almost say I don't think we'll get it done.
Well, just get an RTF renderer that you can plug in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. And the good thing is these are being recorded, so I know you're thinking he's just nodding his head and he's not paying any attention. But it's all, if you're using the mic, it's all getting recorded. Everybody back on the team says, hey, as soon as it's online, let us know so that we can, go ahead. So it is getting recorded. These will all get back.
What are you doing with support for managed? Because we have multiple teams that are doing a lot of C# work. We can embed ActiveX within C#, but I'd really like to take some of that C# work or WPF, embed inside like a dialogue, that type of thing. Anything going on in that area?
So for Dev 10, the majority of the stuff we're going to do for interop is going to be around guidance and samples and things like that. We're not having any new technology as such that's going to do interop. We're at the moment, there's the C++ CLI stuff where you can kind of mix the code and we can do a lot of stuff internally as opposed to having to go through pinvoke or com interop. There's things like the marshalling library that came out in 2008. But what we're going to do is build a number of samples of hosting X in Y and A in B and things like that and give you documentation on how you do those kinds of things. But there's not going to be any technology in the box in Dev 10.
Is there any plans for that in the future?
Well, so the problem, well, not the problem, as we said earlier in talking to the customers and in using it ourselves, if you want to write either a managed application or a managed part of your application, C# and VB are great for that, and we can never keep up with them in terms of tooling. They'll always have things like link first, they'll always have drag and drop designers, and if we chase them, then we can't concentrate on the native developer. So I guess I'm answering a kind of mega question here is, if your question is, are we going to have a designer to build a WPF thingy or something? No, okay, because we would say use C#, use VB, they're great for doing that, they'll give you all the tools. What we're concerned about is if you want to get from your either managed GUI or some other managed component, then we're interested in the issues that C++ CLI can address there to get things backwards and forwards. At this stage, we're reasonably happy with the current design and technology we have for doing that. We're not hearing from customers that C++ CLI is their problem going backwards and forwards. What we are hearing is when they go to add a managed GUI on the front of their app, they don't understand where to start, how to factor, where to draw the lines. And that's the kind of stuff we can give you in documentations and samples. So that's the plan.
Thanks.
No worries. Sorry, Nick, hang on. I got someone over here.
For the new controls that you're going forward, are you going to start writing those using Direct2D, or are those still going to be using GDI?
So, of course, it would be better to move all of these things to Direct2D. Okay, but again, it's a time issue and things like that. So, I'm not going to guarantee. We're hoping to get D2D support done in the next version, but it'll take a while before we catch up with everything else. Nick,
So,
that is Nick.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have sort of a general...
You're not going to ask me about iterators again, are you? No? Okay.
In fact, I wasn't even going to ask you about or anything specifically technical, but along the lines of suggestions for
sure.
Direction that Microsoft is going and sort of what we use MFC for. It's not as interesting to us to have just simple class wrappers around the particular operating system functionality. I mean, we already have a class wrapper, for example, on top of the task dialog. it's relatively easy to build. There's a C API, whatever. The stuff that could be really useful for us is being able to encapsulate the new operating system functionality with an automatic fallback for the old versions of the operating system, so that we can build a control that lights up on the new operating system and uses the new functionality, like what Phil mentioned with multi-touch. Like you said, you're not really supporting multi-touch because it's a new operating system function, a new paradigm.
So what I said was it's not our major priority to get that done. So I don't want to say we're not going to, we will support it.
Right. From a direction perspective, what would be really useful for us, and I don't know if anybody else is in this same ballpark, but the ability to be able to write something that works the way, mouse click handlers work with the current operating systems and lights up on a multi-touch display in Windows 7 and provides additional capabilities without us having to write all of the, switching back and forth code. Like the ribbon, control that works back to Windows 2000 is perfect in that respect. I mean, you can write something that just works across everything. But that's really the area where Microsoft could provide a lot of value to us, is being able to let us write stuff that will light up on the new operating system and still work on all the old operating systems in a fallback way.
And in general, that's our preferred method. Like, we would like to do something like that. But as the example of something I showed you today that's new, the Restart Manager, I mean, we can't go and write a Restart Manager for all the previous, and I'm sure you appreciate that.
If you use the Restart Manager stuff, does that still run on Windows 2000?
Well, it doesn't cause the executable not to run. It just doesn't cause...
So that's the sort of thing that we'd like. And even better if MFC could provide, a fallback functionality to actually do, automatic saving and whatnot still. Even though you might not get tied in with the latest operating system stuff, but, so that your operating system, when you're running it on the newer, your app, when you're running on the new operating system, behaves better, and then provides a leverage for us to go to customers and say, look, our app behaves better if you run it on Windows 7, but it'll still work on Windows 2000.
And another example there would be Rob's taskbar. Okay, we want to enable your application to light up and for you to, do all the things like, say, here's the jump list and here's etc. What are you going to get on, 2000 or something? Well, we're not going to go back there, and so that will just give you a great light up feature on Windows 7, and nothing on previous ones. But it's good to hear that, and I made the comment before. I did mention that what we're hearing from our customers with MFC is that the last two operating systems are as important as the next two, because that's where all their customers are. Okay. There's no one over there. Hi.
Okay, a couple of questions. You just mentioned Restart API. Can we have some sort of commitment that it actually will work on XP and lower level? You had the example of, it just won't work unless you actually load library, those interfaces, so you don't link to them like you previously have. It won't physically work. Are you going to make sure that you do down level testing for some of these things?
So we do down level testing of all of our stuff by default. We don't go as far down level as many of our customers. Like, customers still tell us that they have customers running on 95 and 98. We don't test on that anymore. That's out of our... So I think our customers go more down level than we do in our testing. But we don't just test on, like, the currently shipping OS. I mean, we test on a few previous versions. It also depends on the technology and how relevant it is. I mean, clearly, if the operating system is offering something like Rob's taskbar in Win 7, then all we can do is light up on Win 7 and nothing on anything previous.
The question was on the Direct 2D. You said that you're going to implement that. In what areas of MFC are you going to implement it?
So at the moment, we're still working on evaluating. So when I go back, that's the next thing we're looking at. So I wanted to say, because it's such a common request to improve the graphics in MFC, that we've heard people, and we're very excited about the D2D stuff. Maybe it's a bit of a teaser today because I can't give you exact specifics on where we're going to wind up with it, but we're very hopeful that we will have some D2D support. Well, we'll have D2D support in Dev 10.
So again, related to one of the questions the other guy said that obviously the Direct 2D stuff looks good, but if you want to do the DPI aware output, you're going to have to get your ribbon code working with Direct2D to do vector-based drawing. Are you going to go that far, or are you going to be scaling raster bitmaps?
So I can't say today. You know, that's a thing we're going to look at when we go back. We hear it's very important, how much we can get done for Dev 10. You know, I just can't commit to where we're going to wind up at today. So I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. I don't want to say we're going to do it and then not, or I don't want to say we won't get it done. You know, it's like all graphics, it's very complicated. We get a large amount for free from the Windows guys. But, you know, when we find that there's stuff that we have to do ourselves, then it just becomes a manpower kind of issue. But it's important that you mention all these things. As I said, they're all being recorded. When I get back and I'm talking with Ali and Pat and George, you know, we're going to be saying these are the kinds of things that the customers are worried about. They want to know our story for, you know, D2D and what it's going to be. So.
Okay, one more question relating to the
Sure.
ribbon is that currently the license for usage of the ribbon prohibits us from using it. As in, if we want to write a competitive product against Office, then we're not allowed. Now, because that ribbon is a part of Windows 7, are you going to relax that?
So Office own the licensing model for the Office ribbon. Windows own the licensing model for the Windows ribbon, i.e. Rob owns the licensing model for the Windows, not Rob, I got the name wrong there. Yeah, you can, for the ribbon, I'm not sure. The short answer will be we don't own the licensing model. Windows will own it. Whatever Windows do, we will do the same. That's what happened with Office. They have their ribbon, they have their licensing model. We subscribe to that. So I guess we need to go and talk to the Windows guys. The license issue has come up before and what kind of license model that they're going to have, but it's not resolved yet.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks very much for the question, sir. There's still no one over there?
So one comment from my side is about the IDE.
Yes?
I would like
to... Oh, good. Boris is here. Got an IDE comment, Boris.
So
yep.
I would like to have the managed, the native part of the IDE on the same level as the managed part of the IDE. Specifically talking about refactoring missing, unit testing being missing, and as I hear, the Architecture Explorer might also only work on native code and not on the managed code, not on native code. And it really kind of feels being left alone out there. Especially unit testing and refactoring are the corner pieces of agile development, and not being able to use that really hamstrings our productivity.
So the first thing I would say is we understand this. If you did you attend Boris's talk the other night? So Boris covered in detail the fact that we do have a poor story, and we realise that. The Dev 10 is the first step towards making this platform so we can do it. Again, Boris and I don't want to overpromise. We hope to get the infrastructure in place for Dev 10 and then allow, you know, going forward to build on that. I don't know if Boris wants to either correct or expand on any of that. Yep.
Yeah, we also think this is really important. From a strategy perspective, to give you a sense of the internals of what's going on our team, about a year or two ago, we kind of formalized a strategy that I think Damien may have alluded to.
I had the slide, yeah.
And forget that it says, you know, focus on native, whatever developers, make them successful, blah, blah, blah. We recognize IDE productivity as our biggest weakness. And we have invested more time in that than in anything else in Visual Studio 10. Not MFC, not compiler, like IDE productivity. That said, we were coming from way behind. And at the end of the day, now that we're way further along in this release than we were when we first planned it, some of the specific features that you want are not going to appear in this release. I can't say they will. I wish they will. I wish they would, but they won't. However, we are in a way better position to build them. Now that, I'll give you another interesting comment about how Visual Studio works. There's a lot of teams. Visual C++ is a player, right, as part of the whole thing. And you talk about architect tools and you talk about unit test tools. Those are partner teams, and they have priorities, and we try to influence those priorities. And one day they may make a decision, let's say 5 years ago, 4 years ago, that is an architectural decision to implement a unit test harnessing framework designed around managed code. Just that's an architectural decision you make sometimes. And then that makes it significantly more difficult to then migrate to a place where native code can have great unit test support, even if we do all sorts of work. Which is why you got this great feature, right, in 2005, where you could wrap your code in C++ CLI and then do unit testing, which I have not heard of many customers doing. So, you know, some of these things take longer than we'd like. Refactoring is within our control. Refactoring is just a big feature. If you have a solution to make it like a really simple feature for C++, I'd love to hire you. But I think you're going to see, at least in this release, you're going to see some of the smaller stuff. Some of the stuff you see in C#. That's not huge like refactoring, but actually has a lot of use. I can't, you know, say for sure right now because we're still figuring out which ones are going to be finished in time. But we're working on them. These are not no. These are like we are actually currently working on what I would call small-scale productivity features. Things like perhaps showing you errors in the editor before you compile, right? Things like that, which I think would be nice. So, yeah, we recognize this as the biggest area, and I think VS 11, this will continue to be where we spend a huge part of our time, rather than MFC, just to mess with Damien.